Hello, I'm Miss Ginger. Happy spring, and I'm going to be reading one of my favorite gardening books, The Garden of Happiness. On Marisol's block near East Houston Street, there was a big empty lot filled with garbage and broken, tired things. It had a funny smell that made Marisol wrinkle her nose whenever she passed by. But one April morning, Marisol was surprised to see there were lots of people working to clean up the yard. The next afternoon, Marisol saw people digging up stones. Mr. Ortiz was working with a pickaxe. "¿Qué pasa?" Marisol asked him. Mrs. Willie Mae Washington leaned on her shovel and wiped her forehead. "Well, I'm going to grow me some black-eyed peas and greens and sweet potatoes too, like on my daddy's farm in Alabama. No more store-bought collard greens for me." "We will call it the Garden of Happiness," Mr. Singh said. "I'm planting Valore. It's such a beautiful vine of lavender and red. Yes, everyone is happy when they see this bean from Bangladesh." On another day, Marisol watched Mr. Castro preparing the ground, and Mrs. Rodriguez wheeled a whole wheelbarrow full of peat moss. Marisol inhaled the fresh soil smell of spring. "Ooh, I want to plant something in the Garden of Happiness too," Marisol said. "Too late, Nina," Mr. Ortiz said. "Sorry, all the plots are already taken." Marisol looked everywhere for a leftover spot where she could grow something, but the ground was marked by sticks and string. She looked and looked, and just outside the chain link fence, she found a bit of earth where the sidewalk had cracked. "Mira, here's my patch," Marisol called. The piece of dirt was no bigger than her hand, but it was her very own. She picked out the pebbles, and she scraped the soil soft with a stick. Marisol noticed a crowd of teenagers across the street from the lot. They were staring at a big brick wall. The building was sad-looking and closed up, without windows for eyes. Marisol crossed over the street to ask, what were they doing? "Well, City Arts is giving us paint to make a mural on this wall," one teenage girl told her. "What will you paint?" Marisol asked. "We don't know yet," said one of the big boys. "We haven't decided." "Well, I'm making a garden," Marisol said. "I haven't decided either what to plant yet." In the Garden of Happiness, the ground had become soft and dark. Mr. Castro talked to his little seedlings as he placed them in straight rows. "Come on now, little baby things. Grow nice and big for me." Marisol had no seedlings, or even small cuttings or roots. What can I do?" she thought. And then one day, she saw Mrs. Garcia was feeding the pigeons. Marisol helped herself to one big fat sunflower seed. The birds fluttered about angrily. "Only one," Marisol said. "It's for my garden." Marisol skipped back to her garden patch. She poked a hole in the dirt with her finger, dropped in the seed, and tucked the soil all around it. And every single day that spring, Marisol carried a watering can to the lot and gave her seed a nice cool drink. Before long, a nice little green shoot broke through in Marisol's patch, and even on rainy days she hurried to the lot to see. Soon, there were 2 strong leaves on a strong straight stalk, and then there were 4 leaves, and soon it was as tall as Marisol's knee. Green things were growing all around in the Garden of Happiness. Mr. Castro's tiny seedlings became big, bushy things, with ripe tomatoes shining like rubies. "What is my plant?" Marisol asked. Now it was as tall as her shoulder. "What is it going to be?" "I don't know," said Willie Mae Washington, "but it sure is something." Marisol pulled the weeds in the late afternoons when it wasn't so summer hot. Sometimes she watched the teenagers across the street. They measured the wall, they talked and planned, but they had not painted anything yet. Often Marisol saw Mr. Ortiz sitting in his plot in a chair. "Ah, I come back from my work in the factory and I can breathe fresh air here," he said, "and I sit among my habichuelas. This is my little piece of Puerto Rico." "Is my plant from Puerto Rico? Do you know what my plant is?" Marisol asked. Mr. Ortiz shook his head and laughed. "Es muy grande. Maybe it's Jack's beanstalk from the fairy tale." By the end of July, Marisol's plant had grown way over her head, and then at the very top, Marisol saw a bud, and the bud became fatter and fatter every day. Marisol could not wait for the bud to open. "Now don't be looking so hard," Miss Willie Mae Washington chuckled. "It's gonna open up behind your back just when you're thinking about something else." And one morning, Marisol saw an amazing sight from halfway down the block. She ran the rest of the way. Standing higher than all the other plants and vines in the garden was a flower as big as a plate. Her bud had turned into the petals of yellow and gold. "It's a sunflower!" Mrs. Anderson exclaimed as she was pushing her shopping cart by. "It reminds me of when I was a little girl in Kansas." Miss Majewska was rushing on her way to the subway, but she skidded to a stop. "Ah, soloneczniki! So pretty in the fields of Poland!" Old Miss Garcia shook her head. "No, no, los girasoles from Mexico. They bring joy to the roadside." "I guess sunflowers make themselves right at home on every sun-kissed part of the earth," Miss Willie Mae Washington said. "Even right here in New York City," Marisol said proudly. The flower was a glowing circle, brighter than a yellow taxi. "A flower of sunshine," Marisol thought. "My flower is the happiest plant in the Garden of Happiness." All summer long, Marisol's flower made people on the street stop and smile. Soon, the air began to be cool and crisp with autumn. Mr. Castro picked the last of his tomatoes. Mr. Singh carried away a basket full of beans. Mrs. Rodriguez picked her tomatillos. "To dry and cut up for salsa," she said. Miss Willie Mae Washington dug up orange potatoes. "Ooh, I can almost smell my sweet potato pie," she winked at Marisol. "I'm going to save an extra big slice for you, you good little gardener." But something was happening to Marisol's flower. Its leaves were turning brown and dry. Marisol watered and watered until a stream ran down the sidewalk, but her flower's leaves began to fall, and the petals wilted and browned. "Oh, please get well again," Marisol whispered. Every day, more golden petals curled and faded. "My flower of sunshine is sick," Marisol cried. "What shall I do?" "Oh, child," Miss Willie Mae Washington said, "its season is over. Those only live 1 year. There's a time to bloom and a time to die." "No, I don't want my flower to die." "Mi cariño, don't cry," Mrs. Rodriguez said. "That's the way of a garden. But your flower will give you seeds, and you can save those and plant them again next spring." Marisol's flower drooped down to the ground. The Garden of Happiness didn't feel happy to Marisol anymore. The vines tumbled down, the bushy green plants were gone. Marisol collected the seeds and put them in her pocket, but she thought that spring sounded too far away. Marisol felt sad for a while. She felt too sad to go to the empty lot anymore. For a whole week she couldn't even look down the block and remember where her beautiful flower used to be. And then one day, she heard people calling her name. "Marisol, come quick! Marisol, apurate, hurry!" And a golden haze shone on the street. There was a big crowd like on a holiday. Music from the bodega was loud and bright, and what Marisol saw made her laugh and dance and clap her hands for joy. The teenagers had decided what to paint on their wall. They'd loved Marisol's flower so much all summer that her flower and flowers like it were painted all over the brick wall to bring joy to everyone all year long until spring would return. with more of its flowers. The end. Thank you for listening, and good luck with everything that you're gardening this year.